This is the Personal Finance Show.
Hi, I'm Bo Humphreys, and this is the Personal Finance Show. Before I get started with this week's episode, I have a special announcement about next week's episode that I want you to hear. Next week will be a special small business episode of the Personal Finance Show. You might be aware that I'm a personal finance coach, but did you know that I'm also a bookkeeping coach and a QuickBooks Online Pro Advisor? I help people learn how to do their own basic bookkeeping with QuickBooks Online. I want to help people understand their small business, but even with my coaching, they will reach a point when they need an experienced bookkeeper or accountant to help with more advanced things. This is why next week I'll be launching my new website, financialaccounting.ca, which will be Canada's bookkeeping and accounting hub. If you have a small business or work for one and are trying to get your business finances in order, I want financialaccounting.ca to be the place where you start your research. Next week's episode will feature Jeff Cates, President and CEO of Intuit Canada, the company behind QuickBooks Online. I'm really excited about this launch, and I hope you will listen to the episode and check out financialaccounting.ca next week when it is finally ready. Now let's start episode 33 of the Personal Finance Show with a quote from my guest, Raj Lala, CEO and President of Evolve ETFs.
You've got to take a reward from everything that you do. If you constantly look in the rearview mirror and are bitter and twisted, you're never going to succeed in life. I'm a huge believer in that.
I talk about exchange-traded funds, or ETFs, a lot. How the best portfolio is a diversified portfolio, and how the simplest way to diversify is to buy a handful of ETFs that are built to mimic certain parts of the market. Robo-advisors, for example, will usually have what we like to call buckets, made up of ETFs that balance each other out to try to achieve an overall return, depending on your level of risk tolerance. But how are these ETFs built? Who creates funds, and how are they created? The answer is there are a handful of people out there who are skilled at taking a bunch of investments and packaging them together in a bundle, or a fund. This is more of an art form than something you can learn about in books. The art of fund building is something that is acquired over years of practice, but there's also a lot of natural talent to start with, like someone who's a great artist or musician. You have to have some talent to start with, and then you hone your craft. Raj Lala is one of these artists. With his new company, Evolve ETFs, Raj is focused on investments encompassing topics that intersect in Canadians' daily lives. Products like their North American Gender Diversity ETF, which invests in top North American companies as ranked by Equileap's extensive gender scorecard, which includes 19 criteria of gender balance and gender equality. I met Raj at the Evolve office in Toronto, where he shared his personal finance journey and the idea of investing in financial products that mean something to you.
Spend too much time on the early days, but my parents are both Indian. They both moved to England when India got their independence, and It was easier to do that through the Commonwealth.
What year was that?
This would have been 1968.
Okay, 68.
And I was born in 71 in England.
Okay. Oh, wow.
And my dad went to the London School of Economics and was very well versed in business. And he was working in middle management in England in the early 70s. And it was still at a time where there was the color bar in England, and it was tough to get promoted as a visible minority. So in 1975, I was 4 years old. My dad said, you know what? I don't want my kids to grow up in an environment where they get treated like a second-class citizen.
Sure.
So we packed up and we moved to Canada.
And Canada was better at this time?
Yeah.
Like slightly?
Much better.
Much better. Okay,
remember,
good.
this was the period where Pierre Elliott Trudeau was starting to let in a number of immigrants. And that's why so many of the immigrants became huge followers and disciples of the Liberal Party.
Amazing.
Because it goes back to the 70s from an immigration perspective.
The original Trudeau.
And it was also a lot easier because of the Commonwealth, it wasn't very difficult to go from India to England and then from England to Canada.
It's good in a way.
There's a large Indian population that did that. So I came here when I was 4. My dad had nothing and started building a career for himself. And then he took a lot of the money that he made within his career. He was doing accounting work for City Hall and for a number of other organizations. And he took that money and he actually rolled it into a business.
So he was always an accountant.
He was always
that was his business.
He was a businessman.
From India onward, or
Yeah.
he was, what's the difference? Businessman versus accountant?
Well,
bookkeeping?
businessman is not just understanding the financial side, but actually being shrewd enough to actually understand the business.
Okay,
and making shrewd decisions. as well.
Okay.
And he took the money that he earned, or the savings that he earned, and he rolled it into a business. And it was an interesting business because basically he was a distributor of accessories of costume jewelry. So to like Fairweather.
Very specific.
Fairweather used to be, Dialex used to be their biggest customer for my parents' business. And they were doing quite well, and they were, on the same floor as Club Monaco when Club Monaco was big.
Yeah,
also,
I remember.
Back here at 720 King Street, which is the fashion district.
Yeah.
He then took the money that he was making from his business and rolled it into real estate. And at one point, my dad was worth close to $20 million. He made a lot of money in real estate.
Okay, and then what area of this is
condos,
GTA?
all residential. Yeah, it was. I think he owned at one point like about 14 condos throughout the downtown core.
Nice.
A lot of in Harborfront, and we moved into
like the
this,
City Place here, or
this
down
was
in
before
Harborfront?
City Place.
Before City, of course.
This is
what decade are we in now?
This would have been early 80s into 90. That he was invested.
So this was a really good time to do this.
It was a great time.
And
great time.
So wow, and this is I love this. Of course, this is a great success story, right?
Well, let me keep going.
Go ahead, please continue.
It wasn't. He owned a lot of real estate, and then I turned 18, I guess right around 1989. And when I turned 18, he started putting some properties in my name as well, because it was a diversification move. Because obviously you needed to be at least 18
for tax purposes.
For tax purposes, and for
just so you
also
would have
looking
assets.
at our future. And saying, you know what, at least my son will have 3 condos, and he doesn't have to worry. But back then, what you used to do with properties is you used to put like 5% down.
Sure.
Not 20 or 30
Yeah, so
or 40%.
he's not paying the full price.
So it's highly speculative.
Okay.
And he put 5% down. So your margin for error is very small. So if you have a correction in the real estate market, then the liabilities outweigh your assets and you're in trouble. And that's exactly what happened in 1990.
Okay. 90.
When the real estate market crashed here in Toronto. And he lost everything.
Wow.
And now by this point, I had kind of become like a spoiled brat.
Yeah, you're used to all. You got condos in your name.
My dad bought me a sports car, and we lived in an 8,000 square foot home on Mississauga Road, overlooking the Mississauga Golf Club.
Okay.
And my sister had her own wing to her house, to the house, and like she had a jacuzzi and a fireplace in her bedroom. So it was crazy.
Wow.
And in 1990, I was getting ready to go to university.
Sure.
And within the 6 months prior, my dad was just losing one condo after another into foreclosure.
Yeah.
Because the banks were repossessing them. To the point where the sheriff came to our house and said, you've got 3 days to vacate, because my dad was in that much debt at that point.
Oh, no.
And I'll never forget, so we moved to the one condo that my dad had left downtown Toronto, here at the Esplanade.
Wow.
And I'll never forget, because it was the one time I ever had a beer with my dad. Because my dad and I had a more of a traditional Indian relationship, not like the buddy relationship like you have, or that I have with my kids today, for example.
Sure.
And he said to me, I feel horrible because not only can I not afford to now put you through university, but because those condos were in your name, your credit is spoiled and you can't even qualify for OSAP.
Oh, yes. Not even OSAP?
Not even OSAP, because there was a couple of condos that foreclosed.
No, I've done this before. Not everybody knows what OSAP is. So
sorry.
Ontario Student Assistance Program.
There you go. That's right.
We did it because I was like, OSAP, right?
Yeah.
I said it to an American.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's not most people here should know.
But yeah,
OSAP is.
but we have listeners,
especially the ones here in Ontario.
I have listeners all over North America, so it's not necessarily. But yeah, so you couldn't qualify for student loans even.
So I was like,
what did you do?
Holy cow!
Yeah.
I've gone from being this rich kid that quite honestly didn't even want to go to university, because I was thinking I'll just overtake my dad's business, to this kid that actually cannot even afford to go to university it was probably one of the most pivotal moments or times in my life, of course. And quite honestly, in retrospect, probably the best thing that ever happened to me. Because if I was that rich, spoiled kid and I overtook my dad's business, I would have been lazy, I would have been complacent, and I probably would have pissed it into the ground. Also, most likely.
In hindsight, though. But at the time,
you don't know that.
You were having a hard time.
I was horrified.
Your life is over.
Yeah. It was horrible. Wow. So the only job I could get was cutting grass for the region of Peel.
Okay.
Cutting the ditches and the highways on the islands, the medians on the roads and stuff like that.
Like you applied to a bunch of jobs and that was the only one available.
That's the only one I could get. Yeah. Wow. And so I cut grass for 4.5 months, which gave me enough to go to U of T back then, because I wasn't going to be paying for living away expenses because I was going to stay at home and go to university. Okay. And back then tuition was a couple grand. Plus books would be like all in be like $3. So if you can save that, if you get a decent job, you can save that over 4 or 5 months if you're living at home. So I did that. And I did that every summer to put myself through university. It was a great experience. In fact, one thing I would mention that is that I actually owe 1 year's university to the Toronto Blue Jays, because in I think it was the 91 World Series, I entered a raffle to win 7 tickets. To buy 7 tickets to the Toronto Star. This is pre-internet. These are like the prehistoric. The privilege to buy was a lottery system, but then you would still have to pay. I got 7 level 500 seats, and that was the game that they ended up winning the World Series. I sold 5 of the seats for $3,000, which paid for a year of university.
Wow.
And I went with one of my best friends to the game, so I still got to see it. I owed the Blue Jays a lot. I owed the Blue Jays a lot because they had such a great season and they made it to the World Series. So,
I think my brother did that for you too in 2005.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
If before it was really, really hard to get tickets. That's amazing.
I should have maybe gone into scalping instead of the ETF business.
Oh yeah, no, it's a short-lived, and I used to work for MLSE and at the ACC, and they don't look very happy, the scalpers.
No,
so don't.
No, well, today it's automated, right? Today it's StubHub.
But even over the years, they just don't look like the happiest people.
They're not.
It's not the best job. Maybe they're raking it in. Maybe they used to.
They probably get stuck with inventory sometimes. And
exactly, they probably get stuck with a lot of we didn't know this Justin Bieber show was going to go so well. But this is kind of your first money experience. Was you learned the value of hard work?
Yeah, and a lot of my friends said to me, "I'm shocked that you went and set up your own business after going through that roller coaster ride." And I say sometimes, "Yeah, me too." Because a lot of people that would go through that kind of roller coaster would become so risk averse, and that didn't really impact me in that way. So when I finished university, it was 94. There wasn't a ton of jobs. I decided to travel for a year.
What degree did you get?
Economics degree.
Okay,
and poli-sci
and
at U of T.
This would be good for starting a business, of course.
Yeah. But I still didn't know what I wanted to do.
Okay.
Didn't even know anything about finance yet, quite honestly. But I'd heard about it, so I bought my Canadian Securities course textbook, and I traveled for a year. So I traveled. I cut grass for an extra couple of months after I finished university. I traveled for 1 year on $5,000.
Where'd you go? If you went everywhere briefly.
Throughout South America and parts of Asia.
Peru? Did you go to Peru?
I did.
Yeah, I spent a month there.
Beautiful place.
Machu Picchu?
Yeah, of course. Great. In fact, I did Machu Picchu recently
recently?
well with my family. Yeah, it was great.
Did you climb? Both times?
It's amazing.
Yeah, the climb. That was I feel like it was a turning point in my life. Just being at the top, looking down at Machu Picchu City. That giant flag still there?
No, I didn't see a giant flag. Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Was it terrifying to you as well? There's no rails at the top there, and this giant. I mean, you're proud of Peru,
yeah, for sure.
But it's
amazing. They built that.
It's unbelievable how they got, and then Hiram Bingham found it. I think right.
Well, so they say. Remember, there's controversy.
They named the train after him. Is there a controversy?
Yeah,
I didn't remember
controversy because he is the German or Swede, I think.
I forget
Bingham,
his origin.
I think he was the German or Swede, but I think that there's there was actually somebody local that took him to
of course,
that had already discovered
but
it.
he had
Bingham was
money.
Bingham had the profile,
and
so that they could state that he actually found it. So
you got a year.
So I got a year. I was staying in
away.
hostels for like $4 a night. It was awesome. It was great. It was probably the best travel experience I've ever had.
Yeah.
And then I came back and I had actually read my textbook while I was traveling.
You did.
On trains and planes and automobiles.
It's a good way. You gave yourself lots of time, and I hear it's not like crazy hard to study for the CSC.
Yeah, back then, it was. I think you needed a 70 to pass or something like that. And I passed it, and I started looking for a job in the financial services industry because I realized that was what I wanted to do. Now, a lot of people that you talk to from the financial services industry or investment industry will tell you that they started buying stocks when they were really young and they developed an affinity for it. That wasn't me.
That was you didn't have.
I needed money to go to university.
Yeah,
I didn't have money
to
buy stocks. Yeah,
you didn't have any dividends yet.
No, not yet. So my first job in the business that I found through a recruiter was a telemarketing for a group of financial advisors to get people to come out to financial planning seminars.
Sure.
So we would use what's called, I don't know if it still exists, called the Scott's directory, crisscross directory, which has a directory. It's the phone book, basically. And you would go through city by city and you would cold call. Now, there was a team of like 8 people. I was bringing in more than everybody else combined into these seminars. And after 6 months, I was like, okay, I can't do this anymore. Telemarketing is a tough job. It's basically non-existent today.
But you had skills. What were you doing that was different than everybody else? You're just like,
just persistent.
Come on.
It's easy to get demotivated.
Come on to the night.
Kind of stuff.
It's going to be fun. You'll make some money, or you'll figure out how to make money.
But it's also, it's easy to get demotivated for a lot of people, right? So if they make 5 calls, they all go bad, then they go slow into number 6, and then go slower into number 7. All of a sudden, when they were thinking that they were going to do 30 or 40 calls in one night, they ended up only doing 10 or 12, and it's a numbers game.
And the successes don't make up for
it's a numbers game. It doesn't mean that I had that much better personality than some of the others. It's just that I was more persistent. And it was a great experience, actually, because it builds thick skin and persistence.
This is your equivalent. I mentioned this a lot lately. It's your equivalent of like doing a fast food job or working in retail.
For sure. I did that too.
Oh, you did that too?
No, I didn't work retail, but I did a bunch of other, I don't know if you've ever heard of Cutco knives.
Yeah,
but
okay,
yes,
you did
door-to-door Cutco knives.
Door-to-door. So you learned...
I telemarketed for carpet cleaning services. No.
So this is human, you're learning about true human behavior and human nature and kind of the worst stuff that you
I was skipping over that stuff to go right into what my first job in this industry was.
Of course. No, and you can keep going. These are the things, that, as you said, that build our ability, just our ability to have perspective, to deal with life as it comes to you, which you would have never had, as you said, as the lazy inheritor, and your words.
Yeah, the lazy. It's a good.
These are the things, if you don't, you gotta. I don't know. It's crazy. You got to go through bad things or struggles sometimes. Yeah,
I think everybody has to. I worry sometimes about
why do we have
kids.
To go through pain?
I worry about this generation. We kind of go through this whole period where we try to make life better for every generation, right? I mean, my grandparents made a better life for my parents. My parents made a better life for me. I'm making a better life for my kids. But it's getting to the point now where I don't know if kids are facing, I think about the hardships that my parents had to face. Yeah. Like moving around from country to country with nothing.
Yeah. Starting from zero.
Going through British rule, was challenging as it was.
Just being under the, we're technically still in the Commonwealth, but we're not like they were.
Right.
And, I just read a book about, the Tiananmen Square Chinese history. Oh man, we don't even know the half of it. It's
we live in a bubble.
When we wonder why, if I have Chinese friends, why are your parents like that? And they're like, you read this book, that's why. Yeah. And same with your parents, the struggles that we go through. I talk about my addiction and stuff. It's, relatively, it's nothing compared to what people have gone through. Again, we have our own struggles though. Yeah. So you had yours. Yeah. And so you moved on from the telemarketing.
I moved on. Well, actually what happened was I went to the guys that I was working for. I was like, I can't do this anymore. I said, you know what you're bringing in so many people. We don't want to lose you. Why don't you come in and take over a bunch of our smaller clients? Okay. And I said, that's an interesting opportunity. So become a broker, basically. So I decided to do that.
You're selling the product now that you were trying to get people to come in.
Financial planning.
Yeah, financial planning, but you also have a product behind this.
No product. No, you're buying any mutual fund that's under the sun at that point. and building portfolios for investors. And,
Sure,
and you know, I realized very quickly that just wasn't for me. I was 25. And I don't think I was cut out to be managing people's life savings. I was still, you know, I still had a lot to learn.
Yeah.
So a friend of mine was setting up a mutual fund company. I won't name names. And
as much as you're comfortable with. It doesn't bother me, but you keep your
a friend of mine was setting up
a
mutual fund company that was just bought recently by a big insurance company.
Okay.
And he asked me if I'd be interested in helping him out. So flipping to the other side. So going from kind of being a retailer to becoming a manufacturer / wholesaler in the investment in the financial services industry.
And just to interrupt you, sorry, we can get to this, and we will, of course, because your company makes ETFs. But can you just briefly explain, how does someone make a mutual fund? Like, first of all, you have to have capital. You have to have money.
Yeah, it's art and science.
So it's picking. You're picking companies.
It's not. First, it's about your idea.
Okay. Yeah.
Like, what is your idea?
Yeah.
Like, you know, do you want to focus on a specific region? Do you want to create a U.S.-based product that invests in U.S. equities or emerging markets or Canadian-based? And then it's picking, you know, specific asset classes. Do you want to focus more on technology? Do you want to focus more on consumer discretionary, large cap, small cap? So there's this whole process that you need to go through to identify what products you think make a really good investment case. And most importantly as well, that people are actually going to be interested in using.
Like that, and it's all risk is always in mind here, right? So like you have a risk target, like this is going to be this risky. And that's how part of it?
You do. Yeah. I mean, there's, you know, like for example, here at Evolve, we launched a core fixed income fund. That's built for the risk averse. And then we've also got, you know, a future of the automobile ETF that's a little narrower, that's focused for, you know, people that are looking for alpha generators or enhancement to their overall performance. But it doesn't mean that one is for one investor and the other's for another. Okay. It means that, you know, that the smaller niche-y type of products might just make up a smaller portion of a more conservative person's portfolio.
And I want to get into that in more detail. But let's get back to your this is the first mutual fund. So your friend put it together already? And
no, he was trying to put it together, and I joined him. And it was a great experience when I was helping to build it with him. So building the product with all the service providers, with the lawyers, with the OSC, with everything. And that's where I learned how to build product.
That's your first experience.
My education.
Yeah, because there's so much regulation and everything.
Yeah, it was not financially rewarding, but it was educationally rewarding. And I went to this individual a few times because he was the brainchild behind it. Yeah. But I was the guy that was out there front and center for the funds.
You got to know.
I'll never forget. Like, I mean, you know, again, we think about how technology has changed. I would go into a bunch of meetings with different brokers, and then of course I'd have to go back at the end of the day and fax them stuff because we didn't have internet and email back then. Yeah, I know, it's not that long ago, by the way.
Yeah, well, they're knocking on the doors, and
it feels like it was a lifetime ago.
It's
but
funny,
I still remember those days. So I'll never forget. I used to ask him on a regular basis if I could have some equity in the business. And he always said to me, Raj, don't worry, you know, when we make some progress, I'll get you some equity in the business. And probably one of the best lessons my dad gave me was he said to me one night, he said, look, if somebody's not going to give you equity in their business when it's worth nothing, they're not going to give you equity in the business when it's worth something.
Let's wait till it makes money, then you can have a part of it.
So get out.
Good point.
And I was like, yeah, you're right. I need to make a move. So I left. But again, you know, my reward there was I got a great education. Yeah. And you've got to take a reward from everything that you do. If you constantly look in the rearview mirror and are bitter and twisted, you're never going to succeed in life. I'm a huge believer in that. Yeah. So, you know, telemarketing was great in some ways, horrible in others. But what I remember was that it helped me build perseverance and tenacity. Yeah. Going over to that mutual fund company, there was a lot of things that I didn't like. But what I focus on remembering is it gave me my education on how to build product and how to distribute product as well. Then after that, I went and set up my own hedge fund of funds company.
So you knew at this point that this is what you want to do, product.
Yeah,
you want to build a fund. What is it about it?
I don't know. Maybe it's like an insecurity of looking for affirmation that when you create something, people validate it by saying, I love that product.
And I don't know.
It. It's probably part of it.
It's like, why do we create anything?
Yeah.
It's
a great feeling.
Art.
Yeah, it's a great.
Do you see it as art? Well, you said it is an art. You said that earlier.
It's a total art.
Because I don't know if everybody realizes or would think about it that way.
Well, you have to have a sense of what the market's looking for. You have to be able to identify the gaps and see whether there are actually gaps worth filling. Because there's tons of gaps. Like, for example, in the ETF world, somebody just launched a pet supplies ETF.
Really?
Sure, that's a gap. Okay. But I don't think
that
you need an ETF. I don't think that's a gap that really needs to be filled.
Because there's how many, like, what, do you have a number? How many ETFs in Canada?
In Canada, there's probably kissing 700 now.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Like, why?
To express views.
But how many are
But there needs to be more than 5 people that want to express that view, right?
So, like, do you have an idea of how many of these are just, like, just shouldn't be there? They shouldn't exist?
Oh, yeah. Like, I mean, I would say at least 200 to 250 probably shouldn't be there right now.
Who's buying them? Like the people who made them?
I would say that those are examples of ETFs that are not being bought, and they're just sitting there almost like collecting dust. I mean, everybody's going to but every big provider is going to have some of those. Eventually, what you have to do is merge them or shut them down.
Is it because it doesn't cost a lot of money to keep it going?
It does.
It does cost money.
But you hope to live to fight for another day, right? I mean, imagine if you had started a tech ETF in 2099, you'd be getting killed. Would you shut it down or would you wait? If you waited, you would have lived to fight another day because technology caught back on, right?
And the early Netflix,
right?
However that,
yeah. So you just don't know. You have to be able to see a light at the end of the tunnel. Sometimes there is no light. Sometimes that light never comes. Sometimes that tunnel is just so long that it's tough to get there. So eventually,
so you build one. You build one of your own.
I built a hedge fund of funds company. So this was a hedge fund of funds that invested into other hedge funds. So it gives you a diversified way.
A hedge fund, yes.
Yeah.
Not the same as a mutual fund, not the same as an ETF or index fund.
No.
Yeah.
And it was great. I mean, I raised about $45 million in about a year. I got to know this company called Jovian Capital. Philip Armstrong, who ran Jovian, him and I became very good friends. They ended up taking a small equity stake in my business to provide a number of services. And then him and I just, my office was in Mississauga. He used to live in Aurora. And every day on his drive home, he had a 45-minute drive. So he would chat with me on the phone. Okay. And we got to know each other basically by phone most of the time because I was usually in Mississauga and he was downtown Toronto, the office. And eventually he said, listen, Raj, I really like what you're doing with building this company. We want to set up an asset management division within our firm. Why don't you sell us the rest of your company? And why don't you come in and build or incubate this asset management platform? And I thought it's probably better to own a smaller piece of a potentially much bigger pie than to own a big piece of a small pie. And I'm glad that I did it. I sold my business to Jovian. I went in to start what was called Jovian Asset Management. It was probably a great move because about 6 months after I sold my business, there was a couple of hedge fund blow-ups that got themselves into trouble. And
what does that mean? What is it when it blows up?
Some fraud in some of the other hedge funds in the market that were very predominant in the retail market. And
so they're inflating the value, or people are claiming
investing when they weren't investing, and stuff like that. So, or saying certain people were involved when they weren't involved. There was a lot
to gain credibility.
Yeah,
and
so
it turns out it was all.
So what happens is, when you get a couple of those things, everybody just turtles, right? Nobody wants to invest anything into hedge funds.
Who do they trust now?
They can't trust anybody. How do they know that anyone's different from the other? So I'm glad that I sold it because it would have been a tough time to build a business in that type of environment. And then I started, putting together products. So mutual funds, structured products, alternative products with Jovian. Built it from zero to about $2.5 billion in assets within about 5 years. Jovian also incubated a well-known ETF company that exists today called Horizons. And I helped out running the distribution team that covered the Horizons ETFs and got to know the principals that put Horizons together. As well, and obviously I did not know at that time how great of a business that was going to turn out to be. I left Jovian. I resigned from Jovian at the end of 2007 because I wanted to do something my dad never did, which is my wife was pregnant with twins. They were going to be born in February of 2008, and I was like, I want to actually hang out with them when they were born.
Sure.
So I went to Philip Armstrong, and I said, listen, I think I want to go. I want to spend some time with my kids that are going to be born, and I want to go and set up my own business again because it's just, it's just in me to do. So he understood. He wasn't happy, but he understood. I think he takes the school of thought, which is that if somebody really wants to go, and you pull out all the stops to keep them, it's just a Band-Aid solution because they're still going to go, so let them go, which was great. I mean, he's still very much a mentor of mine today, and we're still close. So I left, stayed for like 4 months. I left like the week before my kids were born. And it was probably a mistake because, I mean, the truth is babies in their first year really don't care about their father. It's all about the mom.
But the mom was very appreciative of you being there.
The help, for sure.
With two, especially.
It was a lot. It was a lot of work. It was obviously the best thing that happened to me. But it was a lot of work. But that year was rough, right? This was 2008. So
wow.
So I'm spending time with my kids, and at the same time, I not knowing that we were about to enter into a financial crisis.
No, but you got all of your investment out of the previous company. Yeah. So now you have this pool of funds that you're going to start this new business with. Okay, so now the crisis hits, and what happens?
I was building out my business plan to set up a structured products company, like of closed-end funds, listed funds that basically get listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange, and then the financial crisis hit. The good part is I never got started, because if I had gotten started and started burning through cash, that would have been tough.
Yeah.
Or if I had products in the market, they would have gotten killed from a performance perspective. Sure. So that was
never
the
looks
positive
good at the
side.
beginning.
But again, easy to look at in hindsight. At that time, I didn't know whether this was going to be a financial crisis that was going to last for a few months or a few years.
You don't know, right?
You don't know.
We all think about it now, of course, but you don't know.
So I started really building it, and got a couple of partners. One of my partners, who's also a partner in this business that evolved, Michael Simonetta, decided that he wanted to be part of it and wanted to build it with me. We raised in the closed-end fund business about $1 billion in a number of creative products. And then as we started building it, we realized that the industry was changing. It was evolving. And one of the companies that was a sub-advisor for one of our funds, called Fiera Capital, said to me, Sylvain Brasseau, who ran Fiera, said to me over lunch one day, if you ever decide you want to sell your business, we'd like to take a first look at it. So I gave him the first look, and he was interested in Fiera Capital, buying it. Fiera Capital is one of the largest asset managers in Canada. They are the largest in Quebec, and ended up selling my business to them. What that provided for me personally was the complete security to know that my kids won't starve, but they're still going to have to earn their keep to build their own career.
It was like your dad giving you the condos.
Except this isn't levered.
Yeah, exactly. There was no leverage. You actually had this money.
Exactly.
And so you were doing what he intended to do. And you did. And this felt good.
It was great. It was great.
But you spent all these years, and I apologize for interrupting. You're basically, I'm trying to equate it to you're learning how to paint or play the piano. I'm a keyboard player myself. And you have these skills. Yeah. And you love it, obviously.
I love it.
You love this, yeah.
For sure.
It's great to hear people at the top, be like passionate about the product. You're not just in this for the money, right? You're not just in it because it's making you and others money. Yeah. You really enjoy doing this, and so
I really do. In fact, money to me is secondary. At this stage in my life, it's about really enjoying myself and doing something productive and bringing interesting opportunities to people, and also building a great team. And everybody on my team here at Evolve, not everybody, 80% of the people have worked with me in previous lives.
Okay.
So either Fiera, or they worked with me at Propel, which was a structured products company. A couple like Keith worked with me all the way back to Jovian days. I've worked with Keith for 15 years.
Yeah.
So, the luxury of getting older in the business is that you make some great friends along the way, and you work with some great people.
So
and you realize who's good. Yeah. But you also realize who you want to work with and who's good.
Yeah.
The best part about my team is they don't really need to be managed, because they all kind of know how to go from point A to point Z. And again, I would not have known that by starting out in the business at age 30 and hiring people. You got to go through that trial and error. So I believe I've put together the best team in the space. Obviously, I'm biased, but in addition to putting together a great team, we all get along really well. I love it. So anyways, I sold my business to Fiera. I went in to run the retail business for Fiera. Fiera was an amazing company to work for, probably the best work experience I've ever had, like in terms of the culture and the people that worked there. I really enjoyed it. But I really wanted to build out an ETF business. And
why did you want to build an ETF
I'm a
business?
huge believer that ETFs are the future of the investment product side.
And why is that?
Because they're cheaper, they're more transparent, they're easier to use.
Those are the main things. But people want
absolutely.
lower fees. They want transparencies, of course, and easier to use because you can buy them. They're traded
they're listed on
the
an
market.
exchange. You can trade.
You don't have to
during
go through a salesperson.
You can go in and out. You don't have to go through a salesperson. You can do it yourself, or you can go through your broker if you have a broker. I mean, you've got different ways to access it. It's just I say that ETFs are like Spotify and mutual funds are like CDs.
Sure. Yeah. I like that.
And it's really it's just about, they might cost similar in some cases, but if you factor it all in, Spotify is way cheaper than buying CDs, because on a CD you might like 2 songs.
Yeah.
Right?
Now you got this CD.
But they're
what do you
easier
do with
to use. It's just a more current way to invest, and things change and
they evolve.
If I'm allowed exactly.
to use that.
We're going back there. So to me, I feel that ETFs are where the future is from an investment product perspective, and that's really why I want to. And so I didn't feel like Fiera was really committed to being in that business. Rightfully so. They were focused on other areas of the market, institutionally and private wealth and so on. And they're also involved in another ETF issuer as well. So Wisdom Tree, which is one of the world's largest ETF providers, came knocking on my door and said, we want to set up shop in Canada and we'd like you to run it. And I was like, this is amazing, because this is a entrepreneurial, innovative, New York-based shop
that you're looking for.
Create real products. And they were great in many ways. They have great products. It just wasn't a good fit for me.
Okay.
It probably wasn't a good fit for them, because I think I had just gotten so used to kind of, if not being the guy who developed the strategy, at least having a seat at the table. Yeah. And I think what I realized is that I need to build something again.
You need the creative control.
Love the creative side. Yeah. So, and I also think that, you as you get older, you also realize, what you're good at and what you're not good at. Mm-hmm. And I'm not great at selling other people's products. I'm way better at creating and selling my own. Yes. It's like, we all think our kid is the cutest. It's the same type of thing. I love the creative aspect, but I also love going out there and talking about it, because nobody should understand your product better than the people that created it, right? So decided that I was going to leave and build Evolve. So I started working on Evolve at the beginning of 2017, and 9 months later, we gave birth to our first suite of ETFs. We started at the end of September, and we're 7 months in, and it's been going great. I mean, we're way ahead of our forecast in terms of growth, and I think it's because we're just creating relevant product, right? I mean, when you think about investing today, like millennials, for example. Yeah. 80% of millennials that invest want their investments to say something, to make an impact.
Meaningful in some way. Or aligned with your values? Is that
could be about environmental, could be about social, could be about governance, which is ESG, could be about a number of things, but they want to express a view. And so we've built kind of 2 pillars to our business. One is on the active ETF side, which is, identifying asset classes that you can point to that actually do benefit from good active management. And then the other side is our thematic index-based ETFs. And, when we went through the exercise of creating this business, a lot of my friends told me that you're nuts. Like, why do you want to be in, why do you want to try and compete with the other 650, 700
ETFs
so many that exist? And I said, you're probably right. We don't need another TSX 60 ETF. A lot of these core areas are well served with the incumbents, with the big ETF players, but there's a number of areas that are unserved or underserved. And on the thematic side, a lot of them are unserved. So when you think about thematics, it's not about fads, because they often get used interchangeably, which is far from the truth.
Like the pet supplies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I can't even.
No, I can't either. But thematics to me they encompass long-term investment trends.
Okay.
So, example, cybercrime is not going to decrease in the next 5 or 10 years. It's going to only increase. I've seen reports that say that cybercrime is going to cost about $6 trillion a year in terms of lost money in the global economy. And think about that. That's bigger than most countries' GDPs. So it's nuts. So when you think about that, you say, okay, if cybercrime is going to continue to rise, then the companies that are providing cybersecurity services are going to continue to be in demand and increase demand. So creating a product that invests in cybersecurity companies makes sense. It's a long-term investment trend.
I want to support that. I want, because it's so important for everything that we're doing. Like anything to do with transferring money, anything to do with work on the internet, if people are going to be able to keep stealing our passwords, or even having passwords at all, we need a better way, right? And that's, for sure. And that's what this ETF would be focused on. It's like,
well, think about it.
Think
about it. In the next couple of years, there's going to be 20 billion connected devices.
Yeah.
20 billion. So that works out to be like 3 per person on the planet. Right?
I got a couple. I'm looking at 3 or 4 right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you've got 4 here probably. I've got 1 in my pocket. That's 5. But I've got a bunch of others in the office.
That's
plus,
right.
I don't know, 5 iPads at home and phone stuff like that. So
and
it's
they are
easy
all
to say.
Connected. They all can connect to anywhere. Yeah.
And even even in the poor countries today, they don't have landlines. They have cell phones. Yeah. It's cheaper for wireless than it is to lay the cables.
Absolutely.
For landlines. So. When you think about how many devices are going to be connected, you think about all the opportunities that cyber criminals are going to have to infiltrate. If you believe in the future of the automobile, that we're going to have autonomous vehicles, which is another ETF that we created.
I do believe in that. Yeah.
Is cybersecurity is important there too. Because imagine if, in 10 years from now, we have all these self-driving vehicles out there.
Somebody breaks in.
And somebody hacks and creates accidents.
It's like a movie. I've seen that.
Okay, but right now, not to be doom and gloom, but right now, for example, I don't know if you know this, but pacemakers are connected.
Yeah, I've heard that, but I don't know how.
They're connected to a computer.
It's terrifying to me.
So think about it from a perspective. So what started to happen now is hackers have actually hacked into pacemakers, and they're basically contacting the person and saying, if you don't give me X dollars in the next X minutes.
Come on!
Oh yeah, we're gonna kill you. Well, no pun intended. I mean, they're gonna
kill the person,
the pacemaker. They're gonna kill the person. So
I don't know why I think that's more wrong than other. Like, it just seems like that's wrong. You shouldn't do that, wrong. Criminals. It's all wrong. You're right.
Cyber criminals have become so smart. I say when I'm talking to a lot of advisors, like, remember the blue screen of death?
Yeah.
But there was no economic model to it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean. It was a Trojan horse planted in your computer that was going to freeze up your hard drive. You'd have to throw your computer away, or if you found somebody really smart, they could fix it. But that was it.
Yeah, they didn't get any benefit. But now you're right, it's hostage.
Now it's Petya. Now it's ransomware.
Ransomware, that's it.
Now it's breaching and taking your data and saying, if you don't give me $1,000, then I'm going to do what I want to with this data, or give me $1 million, or give me 10 million, depends on the data, right? So cyber criminals have become smart. And actually, there's honor among thieves, because most times, if you pay that ransom, you actually do get your data back and nothing happens.
Well, because the business model is shot, if not,
Bingo.
Right?
Bingo.
So that's a cyber security, which is so relevant right now. And you mentioned auto.
My daughters now are 10. I think that there's a good chance that they won't need to drive when they're 16, 17.
I've heard that.
I'm a huge believer that the technology will be there by the time they need to drive. The question will be, will legislation allow self-driving vehicles?
Yeah.
So that's where you're going to have some speed bumps, no pun intended, along the way, because, we've had some mishaps, some tragic mishaps, like Uber had a death in one of their self-driving vehicles a couple weeks ago. A number of them have had challenges. It just means that, they need to make more advancements and they need to allocate more resources to spending for it. But I'm a big believer that we will continue towards autonomous vehicles and we will continue towards electric vehicles.
So each one of these ETFs that you have, it carries some risk, right?
Yeah.
So that's the risk there is that legislation will stop the advancement of vehicles, the things that we can't control. We don't know this. So how do you balance the risk? You just make people aware of that there's a risk when you invest in this and that it's a part of your portfolio?
Yeah, we don't advise end investors. I mean, I don't talk to end investors, right? I mean, they either go and use a do-it-yourself discount, or they go and use the brokers, who I'm speaking to are brokers who are providing the investment advice and making the portfolio allocation decisions for investors. So when an investor, goes through their entire financial plan with their advisor, they identify, their risk tolerance.
That's
and based on that risk tolerance.
And they can recommend these products if they fit in, or if they fit in a nice corner of their portfolio, if they're balanced somewhere else. There's room in anybody's portfolio for this. But if this is what they want.
But it could be 1%, it could be 20%. I mean, it depends on what your risk tolerance is.
Everyone's different.
Everyone's different. I mean, right now people seem to be piling like 30 or 40% of their net worth into cannabis stocks.
Yeah.
So everyone's different. I don't know if there's a lot of financial planning that's going into that, but I mean, you're definitely seeing a lot. So, but when you look at that, let's say legislation doesn't allow autonomous vehicles. Still doesn't mean that technology is going to stop.
It's a good point.
Right? So today, in most cars that are made, my car now is, I think, 2.5 years old. I've got a blind spot checker.
Yeah.
I've got park assist.
Backup.
I've got
video.
backup cameras, front end cameras.
Yeah.
That's all on the path to autonomous vehicles.
It is. So these
and
are just bumps in the road.
These are bumps in the road, but I can tell you, blind spot checker has saved me probably at least from 3 accidents.
Totally.
Right? So it's also, most importantly, making the roads safer. And when you have full autonomous vehicles, you shouldn't have any traffic fatalities or roadside fatalities.
If they're all autonomous.
And you shouldn't have accidents, which means that you're going to result in and you will probably have less car ownership because the shared element
I've
will
heard
become
that a
more
lot.
predominant.
That's the story.
It's really interesting. And then on the electric side, you see countries publicly stating that in the next, depending on the country, 10 to 20 years, they're going to ban the combustible engine because of the amount of pollution that it's creating. So car manufacturers are migrating towards either hybrid at a minimum, or at least, or definitely electric vehicles. So there's making huge strides in the electrification. The cost of the batteries coming down, which was a big challenge before. I mean, that's one of the reasons why the Model 3 from Tesla will eventually come out and be cost efficient, because the cost of the battery for electric vehicles has come down as well. So most auto manufacturers are going to, I think in the next 10 to 20 years, probably not going to be manufacturing combustible engine cars. And it's going to change our entire environment.
It's crazy to think, right? Because it's been everything that we know. We grew up in this combustible engine world, and it's going away. And a lot of people don't want to believe that it's possible, but we have to accept the reality.
I think you're right. And so our ETF is not just investing in the car manufacturers, but investing in the supply chain, investing in the battery manufacturers, investing in the technology companies that are working towards autonomous.
And that's how it's well rounded, right? It's not like
your proxy.
It's not just Tesla, right?
Whenever people think of the future of the automobile, they think of Tesla. Now, I don't know whether it's true or not, but I talk to a lot of people who are entrenched in the auto industry, and they actually think that Tesla is going to be the next BlackBerry instead of the next Apple, and that GM and Ford are actually making more advancements on electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles than even Tesla is. I don't know whether that's true or not, because I'm not entrenched in the auto space. But what if they're right? What if you decide that your proxy to invest in the future of the automobile is Tesla?
Yeah.
And they're right. That was a bad investment.
Yeah.
Right?
That's why it makes
sense. That's why it makes sense to buy an ETF.
Yeah, ETFs make a lot of sense.
Gives you diversification.
Diversification, I promote this a lot. Diversified portfolio of diversified portfolio of investments, right?
Yeah.
Like diversify your diversification. Yeah. And we could keep talking about all your ETFs, but I am taking up a lot of your time, and so we can just leave it at that.
Sure.
Those are two great examples. I mean, there's a gender diversity one that I really like, and
our cannabis ETF.
And the cannabis ETF. And if you just want to list off the ones that I'm missing, a blockchain ETF. And we can get into, it might be obvious as to, what these are and why you would invest in them, because they are the future. A lot of this stuff is the future.
They are the future. I mean, I think blockchain, probably one of the misconceptions is everyone just ties blockchain to cryptocurrency.
Or Bitcoin specifically, which is not true.
I think the future of blockchain is going to be the second coming of the internet.
Yeah.
And big complexes like Microsoft and IBM and Accenture are already allocating a lot of resources to blockchain research and blockchain implementation. So to me, that's important. Same long-term trend with cannabis. I mean, the recreational use is coming upon us in a few months. It'll be interesting to see how it gets implemented, but Canadian companies are fulfilling the global demand in their position. We're going to be the first of the G8 countries to legalize recreational use of marijuana, and I think that's going to be a huge industry for us. Nobody really has a great sense of what the demand is going to be like, because nobody has a great measurement of the black market.
Yeah.
Right?
So there's one thing that we can't figure out.
Come on.
Right?
If Stats can't send a survey to you and say, do you use cannabis? What are you going to, while it's illegal, are you going to actually
We need to work on that black market data.
So it'll be interesting to see. So, I mean, those are a couple that really do encompass long-term trends. Gender diversity, same thing. Long-term trend. The companies are not going to go backwards. They're not going to say, whoa, we have 30% females on our board. We got to move back towards 100% male.
No, and I like that. Keith and I were discussing, and you pick, there's companies that have a pretty distinct policy about gender diversity, not just putting a couple of women on the board to meet their quota, they have an investment in this, and it's important.
And this, I talked about my daughters as it related to the cars.
10
ETF,
years old this year?
They're 10, but yeah, they're 10. But I mean, same thing for the gender diversity. I want them to go into a work world where they get treated equally, where they've got as much chance of getting promoted as their male counterpart.
Yes, please.
And they get paid as much, which does not exist today. They get paid as much as their male counterpart if they're doing the same job. They just need to be on equal footing. It doesn't necessarily need to be 50-50 in the workforce, but they just need to be treated equally, because it ends up actually paying dividends. And I think companies need to understand that it leads to better performance, because if you have more females in the workforce and more balance in the leadership and in the employee base and better HR policies, you tend to have a happier workforce.
Everyone from different backgrounds, different religions.
That's the entire diversity and inclusion.
Different anything will bring a different perspective. And if you have a whole bunch of guys who have grown up in the same way or have the same thoughts, you're just going to have one direction, and maybe that's not the best way to go, is it?
Yeah, I totally agree. And so I think a lot of our ETFs are kind of encompassing, the right thing to do. And you have to believe that it makes investment sense as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me in the Evolve headquarters. And it's exciting.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for talking to me, Raj.
If you like this episode, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. It would mean a lot to me, and it only takes a few seconds. For the show notes and any links from the episode, head over to my website, investwisely.ca. And while you're there, please feel free to send me a message on my contact page. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Personal Finance Show. Like I said at the beginning of the episode, next week is my small business episode and the launch of my new site, financialaccounting.ca. I'm really excited about this, and I hope that you tune in next week and check out the new site.